Hi, Year 5, more from The Ice Monster by David Williams. We're going to start from chapter 42. Backdoor barrage. It was a botty burp, exclaimed Dotty. I can't smell anything, protested the sergeant major, pointing his nose towards the lady and sniffing the air. Count yourself lucky, chimed in Elsie, continuing the lie by wafting the air in front of her screwed-up face. Pooh! It's a real stinker. How utterly uncouth, huffed the older soldier. I had no idea that ladies could even, for want of a more polite expression, unleash a gas attack. Sadly it happens, mused Dotty. Hoo! There my bottom goes again. Hoo! Oops, and again. The sergeant major's face turned a shade of beetroot. Madam, do you have any control over your, for want of a more polite expression, rear gun? Hoo! It seems not, replied Dotty. Dotty's got a grotty botty. Elsie could feel the mammoth becoming more and more restless. Please let us go through before she lets another one go. Most irregular, muttered the oldest soldier. He raised the gate at once and saluted as the three unlikely visitors passed through into the grounds of the Royal Hospital. Thank you so much, said Elsie. Who? Naughty bottom, called out Dotty, slapping her own rear end. Just as they led the mammoth across the lawn, she stopped. With her trunk, she snuffled under the snow and began to munch on the frozen grass. Frump, frump, frump. Having not eaten for 10,000 years, the animal was hungry. As much as the pair tried to keep moving, the mammoth was staying put. From under the sheet, she munched and munched and munched. She must have eaten a ton of grass before she was full. From his sentry post, the sergeant major looked on. He raised a telescope to his good eye and spied on the strange goings-on in the grounds of the Royal Hospital. Just refuelling, called out Elsie. The old soldier shook his head. Ruddy, strange sort of tank. Yes, it doubles up as a lawnmower, said Dotty. Just as the pair thought they might have got away with it, the inevitable happened. The animal laid a mammoth poop. Thud. The prehistoric poop plopped onto the snow. It was mammoth both in origin and size, large and brown and steaming. Just testing the brand new weaponry, explained Elsie. It's a stink bomb, added Dotty. Don't worry, began Elsie. It's not explosive. Then she added under her breath, I think. Well, you can't leave it there on the lawn, roared the sergeant major. What do you want us to do with it? Asked Elsie. Put it back in the chute. The pair looked at the back end of the mammoth. I'm not sure that's going to work, said Dotty. I'd say it's more of an exit than an entrance. Well, pick it up then, he ordered. Me? Asked Dotty. She'd been a cleaning lady for 40 years and dealt with all kinds of unspeakable mess, but this was way beyond. Yes, you, said Elsie. The lady gave the little girl a stern look. Don't dilly-dally, woman, get on with it, bellowed the sergeant major. Reluctantly, Dotty bent down. Holding her nose as far away from the hot steaming pile as possible, the lady scooped it up in her hands. She stood up and held it away from her as far as her arms would allow. At last, called out the sergeant major. The three unlikely friends moved on. The little girl couldn't help but smile, which made the lady fume. Would you care to swap? Asked Dotty, already knowing the answer. I'm fine, thank you, said Elsie, leading the mammoth across the courtyard. She noticed an unusually short old soldier looking out at them from a tall window. He was smiling, waving and blowing kisses in the most extravagant manner. Titch! Exclaimed Dotty. Chapter 43. A Grave Mistake. It just looks like a hairy elephant to me, remarked Titch in his musical Welsh accent. Elsie was pleased to finally meet this man she'd heard so much about. He was indeed short, not even taller than her. In fact, Dotty was as wide as he was tall. There was no denying that they made an unusual match. However, all that matters was that the pair glowed in each other's presence. The animal was drinking water from a toilet stall in the Royal Hospital, her trunk stuck down the U-bend. Well, she's not a hairy elephant, replied Elsie haughtily. She's a woolly mammoth. I've never heard of such a thing, scoffed Titch. Well, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's a prehistoric creature. I'm prehistoric myself, and I don't remember seeing those as a boy in the Welsh valleys. Well, that's because woolly mammoths died out thousands of years ago. And you just brought her back to life, did you? Said the man with a chuckle. Yes, replied Elsie. Actually, we did. This stopped the old soldier in his tracks. He looked at Dotty for confirmation. The lady nodded her head. Well, What the ruddy hell is she doing here? He demanded. I was rather hoping you might help us hide her, replied Dotty. Me? Yes. Here? Yes. A great big furry elephant? Well, no, Elsie jumped in to correct him. She's a woolly mammoth. How long for? He asked. They live for 50 years or more. 50? Yes, this is just a baby one. How big do they grow? To about the size of a house. A house? Just then there was the sound of a flush in the stall next door. Splish! An impossibly old man shuffled out wearing a nightshirt with a military cap and leaning on a cane. The three looked at one another in panic. They'd had no idea the man had been in there the whole time. Morning, Colonel, said Titch. I'd leave that a minute if I were you, muttered the Colonel, wafting the air and actually making the smell worse, not better. Despite the stink, the three smiled back at him, but said nothing, hoping he might shuffle on. He didn't. The Colonel spotted the rear end of the mammoth sticking out of the stall next to his. He took a moment to admire it before commenting, My word, that's quite a remarkably large furry bottom. New boy, is he? It's a pet, replied Titch. A pet? Yes. Now I'd hate for you to miss your breakfast, Colonel. Let me help you to the dining hall. The private took the Colonel by the arm, but the old man was having none of it. You can't keep a pet in the Royal Hospital, Private. It's against regulations. It won't be here for long, replied Titch, shooting a look at Dotty. No more than 50 years, Colonel, sir, chipped in the lady. Elsie shook her head in disbelief at Dotty's stupidity. 50 years? Sputtered the Colonel. What kind of animal is this thing, anyway? She's a woolly mammoth, replied Elsie. A what? Asked the man. It's like a hairy elephant, added Dotty. We can't have a hairy elephant in here, shouted the man. Whatever is this country coming to? Get the blasted beast out. With that, he whacked the mammoth's bottom with his stick. Thwack! This would prove to be a grave mistake. Chapter 44. Right up my what's-it. No! Shouted Elsie. Hoo! Cried the animal. She began bucking from side to side. Crunch! The wooden partitions between the toilets splintered into pieces as the mammoth struggled to get out. When she lurched backwards, the Colonel gave her another whack with his cane. Take that, you hairy-bottomed beast! Thwack! Stop! Cried Elsie. She lurched at the Colonel and held onto his arm to stop him striking her friend again. Get your filthy hands off me, girl! The mammoth was trying to turn herself round in the cramped toilet. Her tusks bashed into the toilet bowl. Crash! Smashing it to pieces. Splurt! Water began gushing everywhere, soaking everybody and everything. Ugh! Cried the Colonel. Oh, dearie me. More mess for me to clean up, remarked Dotty, never one to leave her job far behind. I'm going to be in big trouble with Matron, said Titch, desperately trying to sit on all the toilets at once to stop water spraying across the ceiling. All he achieved was an incredibly wet bottom. Ooh! He screamed as he was propelled into the air. The water's going right up my what's-it. Eventually, the mammoth managed to turn herself round and ripped the cane out of the man's hands with her trunk. With all her might, she hurled the cane across the room. Whiz! It hit the window. Bang! Shattering it. Crack! Oh, cripes! Not another breakage, muttered the lady. The water level in the room was rising rapidly. All four humans and the mammoth were soon knee-deep in it. With all the noise, it was only a matter of time before someone came thumping on the door. Thud! 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 What in heaven's name is happening in here? Came a female voice. Matron, hissed Titch, a flash of panic in his eyes. Then he raised his voice. It's all right, Matron. Everything is under control. Just a minor problem with the flush. The Colonel, who had only come in for a quiet morning poo, was having no more of this nonsense. Matron, they've got some great hairy elephant in here. Seeing things again, Colonel, she called out. See for yourself, woman, he called back. Matron pushed open the door. A 10,000-year-old woolly mammoth was staring back at her. But before she had time to scream, a rush of water swept her off her feet. Whoosh! And carried her down the corridor at speed. The other five all popped their heads round the door to watch her go. At least that floor is getting a good clean, remarked Dotty to herself. Chapter 45. A Lidolop. Fortunately, there were many fantastic hiding places in the Royal Hospital. With Matron flushed away, Titch led Elsie, Dotty and Woolly down to the food storage room and slammed the door behind them. "It's nice and chilly in here," said Titch. "I'm sure your furry friend will feel right at home." The mammoth did. Elsie did too, for this was where all the food for the elderly soldiers was kept. The old boys obviously ate well, as there were giant jars of sweets and tins of all sorts of goodies, like jam, honey, and treacle. To a girl who had lived her entire life under the shadow of hunger, the smell of the food was like the sweetest perfume. "I'm starving," said Elsie. "Please may I have a tiny bit of jam?" The little girl's eyes widened and her lip quivered. How could the grown-ups possibly say no? "A little dollop can't hurt, can it?" said Dotty. "No," agreed Titch. "No one would miss a dollop." "Strawberry or raspberry?" asked Dotty. "I've never had either," replied the girl. "What's nicer?" "Raspberry, I think." "Raspberry it is, then." Titch reached up and took down a jar of raspberry jam. Slowly he unscrewed the lid as the little girl licked her lips. However, before Elsie could dip her finger in, a huge furry trunk snaked around and slurped up the lot. "Slurp!" "What the?" exclaimed Elsie. "Bad mammoth!" chided Dotty, slapping Willie's trunk away. Whack! The mammoth didn't even react. She was too busy being in a state of bliss at having tasted jam for the first time. "Maybe I should try some strawberry then," said Elsie. But as Titch unscrewed the lid, the mammoth's trunk snaked its way around and slept up every last bit. Slurp! "What?" exclaimed Elsie. "Bad mammoth!" yelled Dotty. "Not too loud," hissed Titch. "Well, she's being very naughty." "I know, but if I know Matron, she'll have all the soldiers up out of their beds looking for that thing." "She's not a thing," said Elsie. "She's a mammoth." "Mammoth thing, then. I don't know." Rumble. "What was that?" asked Elsie. "Thunder," guessed Dotty. "Rumble. There it is again," exclaimed the girl. "Is it the pipes?" wondered Titch. Rumble. "Is it the pipe?" "It is the pipe," said Elsie. "Willie's pipes. Listen." All three fell silent. Rumble. "It must be the jam," said Dotty, not agreeing with her tum-tum. "Don't let her have any more." "I won't," replied the girl, "but I am absolutely starving. You hold her trunk while I have a tiny bit of treacle." The treacle was in a huge tin the size of a bucket. Titch shook his head and lifted it down towards the girl as Dotty blocked the animal's view with her body and held on tightly to its trunk. Excitedly, Elsie prized the lid off. Immediately the sugary aroma whispered its way up to her nostrils. It was so sweet that for a moment the girl felt as if she were floating. She dipped her finger in and felt as smooth as silk. Just as she was about to scoop out a large dollop of treacle, she was shoved against the shelves, causing all the tins and jars to come crashing to the floor. Bang! Crash! Wallop! The mammoth had surged forward to slurp up every last bit of the sweet-smelling gloop. Dotty was holding on to the animal's trunk, so was shoved into Titch, who was shoved into Elsie. Now there was a cloud of sugar and flour and tea whirling around the room, causing the three non-mammoths to cough and splutter. In amongst the chaos, the mammoth's trunk searched out every last morsel of food that had been splattered on the walls, floor, or ceiling, or indeed was still floating through the air. The more they all tried to stop Willie from devouring everything in sight, the faster she ate. Rumble, gurgle, fuzzle. "Oh no, listen to her tummy again," said Dotty. "I think we're heading for an explosion," said Titch. Chapter 46. Bottom Explosion. The girl gulped. "You don't mean a bottom explosion?" she asked. "I do, young lady," replied Titch. Suddenly there was a loud knocking. Boom! 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 "This is the military police. Open up. We know you're in there," came a voice from the other side of the door. "Shh!" shushed Dotty. "Nobody say a word." "We heard that," came a voice. "Yikes!" exclaimed Dotty. "We heard that too." "Darn!" "And that." "Dotty, shh!" implored Elsie. "We heard that as well." "It wasn't me that time," called back Dotty. Grumble, drizzle, gurgle. "I fear a bottom explosion is coming," said the little old soldier at a terrifying speed. Boom, boom, boom! "Open this door at once." "Well, why don't we?" said Elsie with a smirk. "You don't mean use its rear end as a cannon?" asked the little soldier. "Exactly," replied the girl. "I open the door and fire at will." "Just coming, officers," called out Dotty as she squeezed past the mammoth to get to the door. "Quickly, madame, or we will be forced to break this door down." "Patience is a virtue," she called back. "Tuzzer, Grubel, Fajuzol." By the sound of Woolly, she's ready to blow, said Elsie. Dotty put her hand on the key and began to turn it in the lock. Just a jiffy, officers. Click went the key. The door is unlocked, Dotty called out. Croomadoob, Munty, badadoozle. The handle turned and slowly the door opened. The three shared a mischievous look as the mammoth straightened her back and lifted her tail. Fire! Shouted Titch. Fire the creature did. Grrr! The noise of Woolly's bottom burping sounded just like a bear growling. It fired all over the military policemen, covering them from head to toe in hot, sticky mammoth poop. The force of the bottom blast was so strong it knocked them off their feet. The poor men were completely disorientated, as their eyes and noses were covered in the stuff. Let's make a run for it, said Elsie. Charge! Cried Titch. The three guided the animal back out of the larder and began leading her down the corridor. You bring up the rear, Dotty, ordered the old soldier. Not on your Nelly, snapped the lady. I don't trust that area one bit. Where are we going? Asked Elsie. Away from that awful smell, replied Titch, as they hurried along the corridor and up the stairs to his ward. And I'm going to leave it there and see you next time.